Right. So in the previous video, we stopped at where we created this particular network. And now there I forgot to mention that we have to save this network. Obviously, now we need to like keep things in a particular folders nicely arranged so that later we can refer these files quite easily. So how you can save this is you can go to file and go to save network as, and then you can go to the particular folder, and you can let's say, so here I have this main folder with my channel name, but I want to create a subfolder, say uh, let's say basics, to keep things simple. And then inside that, so that's basics is my basically project. One underscore basics is my main project. So in that particular project, I have a network which is just created. So let me create a new folder there in under basics. I name this as network, and inside that, I'll save this as my basic net, or rather, let's keep things as network, right? So network.net.xml. So this is the extension .net.xml. So it's saved as an XML file, right? Right. So network.net.xml, right? So you can now close this, and you can see here inside the basics, inside network, network.net.xml file is created. So now I'm going to run VS Code, or rather open VS Code, right? And what I'm going to do is open this particular folder that I just created, right? So let's go to D, channel and basics, and I'm selecting that particular folder, main folder of the project, right? So then this you can work it as your kind of the project. So you get this message, let's say trust the authors, and so you have everything nicely set up, right? So basics is my main kind of the entire work is inside that particular folder. Inside that, I'll be creating multiple subfolders, one of which is the network. Inside that, I have the network, right? So as you can see, it's an XML file. You can see everything is inside .NET XML tag, and inside that you have the edge tags, and all the different components you created is saved under as XML files, right? So you need this, right? Obviously, you need network to run vehicles. Now, what we need also is to create a simulation out of it. Now, here we are going to first try and simulate one vehicle, a single vehicle, or let's say two vehicles, just so that we understand the components of this particular SUMO simulation model. So I'll create a new folder called demand, where I will kind of define my demand definition here, right? So so let's create a file here. Everything in SUMO pretty much goes in XML files. You can define everything as XML files. Later, you combine everything to one particular file called SUMO configuration file and run it. So here, just to define the demand, I'll create a file. Let's say demand, and here the extension is .rou.xml, right? So it's been identified as a XML file. So here you need to use some sort of a template. Let me see. Let's see whether we can get it from the NetEdit itself. Then that would be easier. Network. Yep, there you go. I'll open this particular network. self. Yeah, and yeah, I think let's create it from a template that I already have. Uh, so yeah, so I'll take that template and I'll just paste it over here. That's my VS Code. Yeah, there you go. So inside demand, you need to have this particular template, right? So basically, this is a root file or ru.xml file. So the main tag is roots. So inside that you can define anything else that you want to define, right? So that's the idea. So to do that, we'll get some support from the SUMO documentation as well, right? So if you go to SUMO documentation, I mean, this is the main page. Yeah, so you can go to documentation, from which you have the search option, and then say just type, let's say, vehicle demand or something like that, and then you'll get some related documents from their documentation, and you can go there and see whether it's relevant to you, right? So you see here, they have some inside route tags. They have defined vehicles accordingly. So the closest option, the what we're trying to do is we are going to create, like, two vehicles, and run it right in ISS simulation. So the closest option that we have is something like this. So either you can direct copy paste it, and then modify it so that based on your requirement, uh, which is what I'm exactly going to do now, right? So you just copy it. So basically you don't need the roots, just take this part, then just paste it over here, right? So then we'll modify this according to our need, right? So now what I'm going to create here is a particular vehicle type, let's say a general vehicle type called car, right? So there are default vehicle types that are there in Zoom, right? So you can straight away use one of those as well. Mm, yeah, I think these are default vehicle class. Uh, sorry, class. Let's see whether I can find it. Yeah, so they say specifying a vehicle class is enough. Mm, sure. Yeah. So here you can see available V-type attributes, and many of them are shown, right? Uh, but simply speaking, I mean, these are not, everything is mandatory, right? So there are some default values assumed, right? You can see the default values are there. To keep things simple, let's say, let's take a vehicle class. so by default the vehicle class is passenger vehicle class. So I think that should be, this is the default vehicle class, right? So in our code, what we can do is we can also indicate this also, right? So for example, yeah, we can say, right? So I'll say v class. So it's by default it's passenger, but let me put it in here. Right, so the length of the vehicle is 5 meters. So you can remove this also, because the default vehicle class is passenger. It can obviously take that attribute through it. So we'll call this as a car, or rather, let's say car. And you don't need to define, I mean, you can define acceleration and deceleration also to even higher numbers, let's say. But what you do is basically the default value is 2.6, that is for a passenger vehicle class. But when you can override it by, let's say, changing that value, right? So let's say I'll override it to, like, 2.7, let's say, to keep it in that way. And then what you need is, so you can define your vehicle class as this, right? If you have multiple vehicles, let's say if you want to have a motorcycle, something like that, you can define that vehicle type with a different ID, right? And then what you need is where these vehicles are moving, or rather the route definition of these vehicles, right? So in this case, in our network, we have, if I inspect this, right? So you have uh, yeah, it's slower than usual, but let's see. Okay, because I selected demand mode, it doesn't work. So you go to okay, now it, right. So the route is basically, my route is I go from E0 to E2, that is one route, and the other route is, let's say, E1 to E2, right? So you can say route one, or rather, let's say route one as, so you give space separated HIDs, right? So you can say E0 and E2, that is one route, that is E0 and E2. The other route, you can simply copy this and paste it. And let's say route 2. You can give colors to routes as well. Yeah, but that's not mandatory, right? So that part. And then, yeah, so the other route is, let's say, from E1 to E2. Right. So then our routes are ready. Then I'm going to insert different vehicles, right? So let's say I'm going to insert two vehicles. First one is with the vehicle ID 1 with a V type here. It's not type 1. It has to be car because we have defined only a car. And let's say this one is taking route 1. And let's say it's departing at, let's say, 10th simulation second. Now here it's a color. Color goes as RGB values. So here R is 1. That means it's a red car. Let's say I want to change it to green car. So I just say 0, 1, 0. Similarly, let's say this one vehicle 2. Again, it's a car. It's because that's the only type that we have. Let's say this is taking route 2. and it's departing at, let's say, 20th simulation second, and this is a blue color car, and I'll change this colors like that. So that's the root file that you had. So that's it. That's done. And then finally, what you need is a configuration file where you need to put everything together. Now, Sumo, you can create a Sumo configuration file from the net edit itself, right? So you go to File, Sumo config, and you using this network, you can create a Sumo configuration, right? So let's say save Sumo config as, right? And then let's go to, so this is where we are. So we have the demand network, and then I'll call this part as run simulation. And this is the executable file that you're going to use, right? So it's a run simulation, and the extension is .sumo cfg. So let me save it and hit OK and save it. And then if you go to your VS Code, you should be seeing this. So, yeah, it's the wrong one. Okay, there you go. Right, so you have your Sumo simulation file, right? So this is, so .sumo cfg extension is also an XML file, but it hasn't been identified. Sometimes it might, you might, the VS Code might not identify it as an XML file. In that case, you need to go here and detect the particular language, right? So here it's XML, so you can click it and then it styles accordingly. That's XML. There you select this and it will work, right? So that's, now it will create, it has identified where is my network file relative to this run simulation file, right? So relative to my run simulation file, for that, in that folder, relative to that, the network is in network folder, and the file is network.xml, right? Now the network file is identified, but the root file hasn't sort of identified. I mean, since obviously we haven't defined it. Now we need to define that as well. We need to give the appropriate tag to it. So here the required tag to input the root file is, yeah, root file. So root files, the value is here. The root is inside my demand folder, demand ro.xml, right? Demand ro.xml. So that's pretty much it. So what you did is, you, in our first video, we created a network file, and then now we have linked it in the Sumo configuration, and we rather pointed the network. And also just a minute ago, we created this demand file, and we just pointed those two files together as relative folder paths. So relative to this file location, relative to run simulation.sumo configuration file, relative to that file, the network is in a subfolder called network, and the file name is this network.xml. And relative to our Sumo configuration file, the demand is inside a folder called demand, and the demand.ro.xml. So that's pretty much it. So your Sumo configuration file is done, and now you have to do, all you have to do is you have to run the simulation, basically, right? So run the simulation. You just have to double click and open this particular configuration file, right? So if yeah, so let me open it. Yeah, so when you double click this particular file, this will open. So as you see, your network is there, and it will show some messages, right? So everything seems to be working fine, right? So the root file is loaded, network file is loaded, and the loading is complete, and everything is shown in green. But sometimes you might see, if you made some mistakes, this will appear in red, and you can't run the simulation, and they usually give some error with some description from which you can identify the issue and correct it. For example, let's say I made a small deliberate error here. I just remove one tag, the the stroke, and I save it, and I go back here, and if I reload this, you see there's an error in expected end tag in the root file, right? So it kind of say where the error is at, so you can go and fix it, and then you can go back here and reload it, and the issue is sorted, and now you can see everything is in red. So this is the this is where you can run the simulation, right? So you can now, since I'm running only 2 vehicles, it will run very fast. So I'll add a artificial kind of a delay so that you can see the simulation, right? You can slide this and you know, set it somewhere, and then you can hit the run button, right? So this is the simulation second, and 10-second green vehicle comes, and another blue vehicle comes and exit, right? So this is the minimum setup that you can do to have your own run your own simulation. We'll see how we can improve this in our next video.